A decent workbench is one of the essentials of a workshop. A few months ago, I built this guy right here. 15 total feet long and 48 inches wide. The bench itself has many unique features, and I built it for around $450 Canadian, so check out how I did it next. So the main parts of this bench are MDF and 2x4s, and you know the way 2x4s are. It took a bit of time for me to find 26 really good ones at the big box store. So I'm going to start off by rough cutting everything down to length. Who says you can't use walnut for a stop block? Now there are a ton of pieces with this bench, so it's really important to mark them. I'm going to start to plane down the faces of the 2x4s to get them looking a little bit more decent. Up next, I'm joining the edges. This makes them flatter and also does its part removing that little bit of a round over on the edges, so you can either cut it off with a saw or do what I did and use a joiner. Having a really good dado stack for your table saw is a really good addition to your shop, and I used it quite a bit with this project. I was here at the table saw for a little while. It felt like I did like 1,000 of these, but yeah, I got it done. After adding the dados, I'm cutting everything down to its final size. Have you ever made a 2x4 look elegant before? This is kind of how I did it. Look at that bend. Pocket holes were a big part of this build. They're simple, they're secure, and I'll save the dovetails for the nicer projects. MDF is a cheap alternative to using plywood. I used quite a bit of it with this one, and it's easy to work with, but I definitely recommend wearing a mask when cutting it, sanding it, or doing any milling process. What's this? Like a glove. A really good tip when you're screwing in the pocket screws, clamp that wood down. It jumps all over the place if you don't. So I already have a bit of the bench assembled. It's kind of rinse and repeat, but I try to do as much of the assembly off the floor and on my table saw. And again, bar clamps came in super handy, keeps everything together, kept everything square. And check this out, that is the home for my Festool MFT. And this right here is where my new CNC is going. Boom, look at that. Slide that in there. Look at those glue spreading skills. Okay, now it's on to the drawers. I'm using 3/4 inch birch plywood for this. And yeah, the struggle was real. Now, I do use my track saw quite a bit with this project, but a circular saw and a straight edge does an awesome job too. Time for another dado setup, and I'm using my overbuilt 2-ton sacrificial fence for this one. So now that the dados are cut and in place, I'm going to rip them down to their final size. And cross-cut them too. Again, miter saw works awesome for this. Circular saw, straight edge. And what's this? More pocket screws? And whenever I'm making drawers for my shop, or maybe a painted cabinet or something like that, I like to use the pocket screws to put them together. Again, save the dovetails for the really nice projects. Now that the drawers are finished, it's time to move on to putting the slides in. A few simple measurements. Now, I did have to add a couple of extra spacers inside the drawer openings themselves because of the way I built the sides, but it worked out. Again, no fancy jigs to get these drawers in, just slide them in. Pull out the slide. Add a couple of screws. To make sure the slides were perfectly square and lined up, I took the drawers out and added the rest of the screws in. Again, long drawer. And I used this jig here to drill the holes for the handles for the fronts. Who doesn't love a good chamfer? Look at that. Just adds that little extra touch to the drawer fronts. Handles are now on, and yeah, looks good. Big drawer in for my Festool sustainers. And now I've started to work on the trim for around the MDF top. I'm using poplar for this. Again, running it through the planer, getting it down to about 3/8 of an inch thick. Use lots of trim with this one here. Now I'm ripping it down on my table saw so it's the right width. And when I add trim, sometimes I put nails, other times I use a little bit of tape. One of the things I do too is with my trim is leave a 1/8 of an inch overhang. It leaves a nice reveal. Quick little round over with an 1/8 inch bit on my cordless router, and yeah, sanding and more sanding. And more sanding, and yeah, finally done. Time for a break.